It's the 9th of January 2024, and I'm here in New Orleans with William Emmett Dwyer. I suppose we'll start with how you first encountered the process, Church of the Final Judgement.
Right, okay. I went into their coffee shop on Royal Street, which was between Barracks and Governor Nichols. And I was 13 years old. And that was around the block from where I was living at that time with my mother. And the reason why I went into the coffee shop was because my mother had suggested I go there. Because I guess a couple days before, Tim Wiley and someone else from the process, Tim Wiley, who was known as Father Micah, had come into my mother's bar in the French Quarter, the Seven Seas bar on St. Philip Street, which is now known as something else. I can't remember what it's called now. It's 3 initials. But anyway, and she met them and she thought that they were interesting people, and she felt like they would be good people for me to go hang out with. And so I thought, I was curious because, you know, this was 1965 or 6, something like that. Let's see, I was 13, about 66. And, you know, a lot was happening in the West in the 60s, especially in the United States. So, you know, in terms of the counterculture developing. And so anyway, I went in and I was curious, and yeah, so that was how I first met the process.
Did your mother give any inkling or say anything about why she thought they were good people, or why she thought you should hang out with them?
No, I don't recall her saying anything, except that she had some people had come into the bar and they were English, and she thought they were really interesting, and they had a coffee shop, and I had gone to coffee shops with my older sister that were in the French Quarter, because my older sister was sort of like from the beatnik era, you know, the tail end of that, and so I was just thinking, oh yeah, coffee shop, that's cool. There's, you know, at the time there weren't any around really. I mean, there was one that I'd gone to with my sister when I was a much younger kid that was in the French Quarter, and I used to hang out there and play chess with people, but there was not another one like that at that time. So I thought maybe this will be something like that, a sort of bohemian hangout with, you know, interesting people who are drinking coffee, playing chess, and burning candles and Chianti bottles or something. You know, I didn't really have any expectation. So anyway, I went in, and I don't remember too much about what I did that first, you know, going in there, going to the coffee shop. And so the coffee shop, there were no chairs. It was just upstairs, and you sat on the floor, and they had cushions and they had carpet on the floor and some low tables, but they didn't have chairs or anything. And all they served was coffee, tea, I think maybe instant hot cocoa, and they would make brownies. And that was about it. It was pretty limited. And that was fine. You could just hang out and smoke cigarettes and drink tea, or, you know, yeah.
So did you get to know them then through going into the coffee shop, or?
Yeah, well, that, and then they held sort of programs, and so I participated in some program where we all sat in a circle, And we were asked the question of, how do you think people perceive you? And I remember answering that question, what I said, because I was a 13-year-old kid, and I was running the streets of the French Quarter, and I was rebellious, certainly. And I said, as a dead-end kid, that just, I said, thought to myself, that's how people perceive me, as a dead-end kid. And I said that, which, I was fine with saying that, but that was pretty much all I remember about what I said. And I don't really remember a whole lot of what else we did at that particular night, the exercise. But anyway. And that was interesting to me. It was interesting to me because as an adolescent, nobody had ever asked me anything about myself. Adults were always busy at the time. This is, in the 60s in Louisiana. They're always busy telling you things. And nobody's asking you, what do you think? What do you think we think of you? that was an interesting question, And yeah.
Was this everyone in the group was answering the question?
Or, yes, we were going around in a round. I wasn't singled out. Yeah.
Move.
Okay.
So, was a lot of it kind of group things like that, or?
Yeah. And I was clearly the only adolescent there. They were all, there were young people there, but they were in their 20s and up. Yeah.
So there weren't any
there was
other 13
No, there were definitely not. And there never were. First of all, there aren't French Quarter is not a place where kids were being raised, so, yeah.
So what happened then?
I don't know, I probably went home.
Like going into the coffee shop and having that experience, and then did you get to know them as friends? Or?
Yeah, I got to know them as people, yeah. And I would go there after school or weekends, whatever, whenever I could, and just hung out there. And then I started helping out with, going to the kitchen and bringing other people their tea or brownies or whatever they ordered or wanted, and walking the dogs and doing some cleaning of the place, and just usual stuff, and then going to the programs. And they never asked me for money. I think they were just like, okay, this kid's here, he's cool.
Yeah.
It's like, and I got to talk to different ones, just by hanging out. I got to know Tim. I got to know Eddie, he was known as Father Joshua. I got to know him, and Father Joel, and Mother Cassandra. Yeah, and
they were all English people.
Yeah, those were all English people. There were Americans who joined at the time. They were adults and stayed with it. These two of them that I know from New Orleans stayed with it, and they're still involved with, what it's evolved into. But, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how did it get from there to joining the process, or like being part of this group? in a more formal way, or
Oh,
maybe it didn't feel like that?
Well, at 13, I was there, and I don't remember how many months they were in New Orleans, because this goes back, 50 years. I didn't know there was such a thing as joining the group. I felt like I was there and communicating with people, and people would communicate with me, and I was just there and accepted. I think that was the big thing. I was just accepted by these adults. There was no... Yeah, it was just feeling like you're welcome here. And there was never any conditions put on me or anything. Yeah. It could just be there. So I was. And they went to leave town. And when they were leaving town, they went and talked to my mother to see if they could bring me along. And she didn't think that would be such a good idea.
Did you know where they were going?
Yeah, California. And so they left for California, and I stayed there. Yeah.
Did your mother think that was strange, or
What was strange?
that they wanted you to go with them?
I don't think she thought that was unusual, but she just didn't think, that I should go with him, because, I guess she was thinking that, well, he goes off with them, he's joining some hippie commune, it's like, he's not going to get an education. They're nice people and they don't do drugs, and that's good. But what's going to come? So I think she was just sort of thinking in a parental kind of, mode. I mean, my mother had read the electric acid Kool-Aid test, and she had this bar. She had, actually by that time probably more than one bar. And so there were all these people coming into her bar, and she understood, the sort of transient nature of people. And the Vietnam War was going on, and people were moving around and trying to evade the draft, and so people were going off, into the country, and having communes. So I mean, it's all part of the culture was going on. I think she thought that was particularly odd. There was plenty of other things around that were going on like that, but she just didn't feel it would be useful to me, I guess,
And to have a countercultural group at that time that wasn't doing drugs,
right?
Was that unusual?
I think so. I mean, everybody was, dropping acid or smoking weed. And, some people were into harder stuff, So, if you have a group of people who are obviously educated, which they were all educated. There were professional people there. They were from, privileged backgrounds, almost all of them. And no, they weren't doing drugs, and they didn't drink, and they led pretty ascetic lives. About the only thing they did was smoke cigarettes. That was about it. Yeah, that really was it. And that set the process apart. Also, not dressing in, colorful garb, because this is the age of the flower children, if you know, right? And so nobody's wearing colorful bell bottoms and you know, nobody's in raids and, you know, with little sunflowers painted on their face or anything. You know, everybody's in dark, you know, black, pretty austere, you know, and in a way, I understood that because I had just spent 4 years in a boarding school where it was all monks who ran the boarding school, and so I was around, you know, men anyway, just men who, for 4 years, they only wore the same, I saw them in the same robe, if you will, you know, and they only wore black, and they led the same kind of life. I don't think they smoked, but they did drink beer, you know, when they weren't around us kids, but they did drink beer with their meals, perhaps wine too, I don't know. But, so I was kind of used to that and being around that, you know, so I kind of understood what they were doing. You know.
And how did you know, or how did your mother know that they didn't do drugs or they didn't drink? Was this something that they used to tell people? Or?
Well, when we went to the bar, they didn't order any liquor. That's what, you know, they'd ask for it, and when she offered, they declined. There was never any. How did she know? They probably told her, and she probably believed them because she was pretty good at sorting out fact from fiction with people. You know, you don't run a couple bar rooms in the French Quarter if you can't read people.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
And when you say dark garb or dark clothing, do you mean like
black?
Black, just like
black
sweaters and
black
pants?
turtlenecks, black
Turtlenecks,
slacks.
okay.
Yeah. The women too, except for Joelle, who wore a dark brown robe, a monastic robe.
And what about jewellery? Was there anything like that?
At that time, I don't believe that they had any of the process insignia and jewelry. I don't remember seeing any. Doesn't mean they didn't have it, just I don't remember. I think that probably came later. Yeah.
So they'd gone off to California.
Right.
You
well,
were still here in New Orleans.
I mean, here's the thing. So when I met them, they had just come out of Stuhl. They had just come out of Mexico. So they had been in the UK, and for whatever reason, they felt they needed to go on a mission of some sort of self-discovery. And so they leave the UK. First, they go to the Bahamas. Something about the Bahamas doesn't feel right. Then they go to Mexico, and they kind of feel like they're in the right place, but they know they've got to go somewhere in Mexico. And so they kind of leave, I think it was Mexico City, and they're being driven around in a bus, and eventually they get to the Yucatan, and they all get off the bus, and wherever they are, and then they go wandering off, and then they find this place near the beach called Stuhl. They find the ruins of I forget what it was, a sugar mill or something. And basically they moved into that. And they weren't the Process Church or the Final Judgment. They were just this group of people that was traveling together on a journey of self-discovery. And while being in Mexico, they go through a lot of things. And nobody's eating peyote or anything like that, right? They're just there. They're doing whatever they're doing, group exercises. They're kind of pushing some physical limits. They're working really hard. They're close to starving, really. because they didn't have money or food, but they're just somehow existing. And then they survived this hurricane, Hurricane Inez, I think it was. And they come out of that hurricane feeling like, you know, there's some sort of epiphany, like we are now bonded as a group, and we think we understand what our mission is. You know, we have these ideas about how human beings should interact with each other based on our understanding of, you know, things that have been said, you know. And so then they arrive in New Orleans, you know, with still this afterglow, if you will, you know, feeling that sense of unity, that sense of mission, okay. And when you're on a mission, you know, you don't know the long road of it, but you know what it is you're supposed to do next. And you understand how you're supposed to be in the moment. And that is the mission, being in the moment and then being open, recognizing to see what it is you're supposed to do next or where you're supposed to go next. And when you get there, you'll see what it is you're supposed to do there. And that's it. I mean, that's it. So much of the process is about being able to be present with people that you interact with, to be fully in contact was the expression, you know. So they were there, and at that point they decided that they wanted to formally incorporate as a church. And so here they are in New Orleans. They want to incorporate as a church. And somehow they were talking to my mother again, and she hooked them up with a lawyer who did the paperwork. And then they became a church. The Process Church of the Final Judgment. Yeah. So
your mother had an integral role, really.
Well, she's
like, at least in connecting.
Yeah, and
connecting people. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think my mother wasn't particularly. She wasn't a philosophical person. So the concepts of, you know, loving your enemy, you know, and what that means in real terms, and what the process was about, she would have just said, that's nice. And she would be looking at how are you treating other people, and you know, that's kind of like, and are you honest or not? Are you deceitful or not? Are you truthful or not? Those kinds of things is what my mother would be looking at to judge somebody. The rest of the stuff wouldn't matter. Oh, you want to start a church? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, go talk to this lawyer. He might be able to help you out. And that would have been that. Yeah.
So how come they didn't?
Am I right, Mom?
How come they didn't set up the church here?
What do you mean? Well, they did.
Or they did, okay.
Yeah, they incorporated while they were here. I mean, a church is in a building. They don't need a building. Right?
So the church is actually founded here in New Orleans?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You know, Amish don't have a church. They just meet in a field.
The church is the people.
This is the people. And if the weather is
Yeah.
bad, they go in the barn. Right? And so, you know, the process doesn't need a building, although they had buildings. And it's good to have a building, but that's not a church. A church is what's between the people.
The building is a meeting house.
Yeah. And that could be anywhere. You know, it's good to have one. It can be useful to have one. But it's not essential. It's essential to have a mission. You have a mission, you have purpose, you have direction. That's what's essential. You're going to have a building with no direction.
Yeah.
No mission, no purpose. What do you got? I don't know what you got.
So they found the Process Church here, and then they go to California.
Right.
And you remained here.
Right. I was 13 years old.
So how did
maybe I turned 14 by then. Yeah.
How did you reconnect with them?
Well, it's a long story, and I don't know how much of it I really need to go into. I mean, I could take up a full hour to describe from that time to just turning 16. But I just turned 16 and I arrived in London looking for them. I'd had no contact with them. I just had a little magazine, I think, with their address of Balfour Place. And so I knew the address, and it's a naive kid. I had a one-way ticket out of JFK on Icelandic Air, and I had maybe $200 in my pocket, which seemed like an enormous amount of money. I know maybe I didn't even have that much, but I don't know. Like I said, my ticket was a one-way ticket. And land in Gatwick after this long flight via Reykjavik, changing planes. And I say plane, I mean plane. It was a turboprop, not a jet. And had to take the train in. Somehow I got the idea I got to go to Victoria Station. I don't know where I got that from. It was like, oh, you're going to Mayfair or you're going to London. Well, I don't know, kid, where this is, but go to Victoria Station. That's central London. You can figure it out from there. Someone can help you, And so I did. And then I kind of wander out the station, and I don't know, somehow I got on a bus, which was another interesting experience for me, and on this double-decker bus. Anyway, and I got off the bus, or where I was, some point the conductor suggested I get off here and go look for this little tiny street. There may have been a cab. There may have been a cab involved too. I think Balfour Place was like maybe 1 block long or something. I do, pretty obscure little place, but it's in Mayfair. And so, boom, all of a sudden I know I'm in the right place, because you look at the door of the, headquarters, if you will, and the door is a process symbol. It's unmistakable. I was like, oh yes, I'm in the right place, and I see, the sign, and I think, Satan's Cavern, which was the coffee shop, that's what they called it, was in the basement. And I think...
So they had a coffee shop there at the headquarters as well.
Yeah, and I think you entered through the front door on the ground floor rather than going down the steps and in through the basement. I think, but I could be mistaken. I really can't recall. And I remember I just walked in to the cavern, and there was someone I knew from New Orleans who was like working the kitchen area, and they seemed shocked to see me. They were glad to see me and welcoming me, but they seemed shocked to see me, and I was shocked that they were shocked. I didn't realize that kids don't just do these things. But I've done a lot of things in life where I'm like, oh, that's a big deal or something, Yeah, so they were surprised. They were delighted to see me, really.
When you're a kid, 2 years or so feels like a long time, but really it's not.
No,
it's not very long. So
right.
Your reconnection was quite quick with them. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was like the people that I knew that I saw was like I just seen them yesterday. At least to me it was. And everybody was very welcoming to me. But they were genuinely shocked. Because there had, you know, last time they saw me, I was a 13-year-old kid in New Orleans. And they had never heard a word from me or anything, you know. I found out later that they had written to me, but my mother did not give me any letters. She did not pass that on. And I don't know what she ever did with them, but I never got them. And I found that from her. So,
and when you arrived at the headquarters, was it more or less the same group of people? Or
there were a lot of other people I had met, did not know who were there. You know, and so I got to meet new people. And of course, the new people didn't, you know, they might have heard the story about me, if you will, but they didn't know me, so they didn't have the same connection with me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Or the same, there wasn't that same, you're here, you're back with us again kind of feeling. You know,
yeah.
They were just, oh, that's nice. Oh, that's an interesting story. Whereas, you know, with others like Tim and Joshua and others and Joel and Cassandra, you know, others who knew me from New Orleans, it was like, yeah, you know, it's good to see you. You know what I mean? Yeah, because you know, strangers to the others, but yeah, so.
So they have the coffee shop, and they have this as their headquarters. Did they live there as well?
Yes, they lived there. They were upstairs, and the coffee shop. I was pretty impressed because it had a menu, a full menu, and not just, you know, we're gonna make brownies in the oven today. You know, you can have more than just, you know, coffee or tea. You can have, you know, a selection of teas. You can have, you know, sandwiches. You know, basic simple things. But you know, it was, and they had an actually printed menu. You know, which is impressive. And it was nicer. You didn't sit on the floor on cushions. They had sort of built-in benches and tables. You know, it was a nice place. You know. So
did people generally go into this coffee shop, or was it just processians?
Anybody from the public could go in. Yeah, I mean, it was mostly for people from the public, because if you were in the process, you didn't really hang out in the coffee shop. You know, you might initially as you're, you know, going to programs or different things, but if you stick around, you know, you might wind up doing something, getting involved in some project or something, you know, making yourself useful, you know. But this was for the general public, and I guess, you know, yeah. So.
And what kind of things would people do to make themselves useful?
Well, depending on what needed to get done and maybe what their skill set is. I mean, I can, you know, the things I did in Balfour Place was, if something needed to be done, like in the kitchen, washing plates or something, or cleaning tables, you know, that kind of thing, something like that. Walking the dogs, you know, taking the dogs out around Mayfair, you know.
German Shepherds?
Yeah, German Shepherds, Alsatians, you know.
Were they all the same kinds of dogs?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What was the reason for that? Or they just liked those?
Yeah. That was the dog of choice. That's what it was. I also had a job of, because people were very busy, I would read the paper, several papers for them every day. And my job was to read these papers, you know, the really cross-section of the British media and whatever else, I don't even remember, but it was like the Sun, the Times, And then stories that I thought were relevant, for me to clip them out, and then not have the full, get the main gist of a story, and to collect the different stories and paste them, put them in a book. Because people were too busy to read the newspaper all day, but people needed to know what was going on in the world. And so I was, kind of filtering the news for them at barely 16.
With any kind of particular political bent in mind, or just kind of current affairs that they might be interested in?
No, that was never directed to from any political. They just wanted to know what are the stories that are being covered, and what's the main gist of what's going on. We don't have time to get into the weeds and read these papers ourselves every day. We're busy doing whatever it is we're doing. We're working on a magazine. We're repairing this building. We're cleaning this. We're doing various group exercises, and whatever we're doing. But we do need to know what's going on in the world. It's important, and we don't just want one news source, because a story is going to be covered, like today in America, let's say, you're going to see how Fox News covers the story, and then look at MSNBC, right? And then you could look at public broadcasting, and you could also look at one of the mainstream, three big traditional American broadcasters, right? So you're going to get the same story. Different ones you're going to get more depth of coverage, and the different ones are going to give you a sort of slant, And so that's fine. They want to get it all, but they don't have time to waste being a victim to it all, if you know what I mean. And one of the things that I reflect on is how important it is, if you're on a spiritual path, to know what's going on in the world. And, just to give you a kind of a comparison or something, if you go to the Dalai Lama's website and you look up what is the day in the life, average day in the life of the Dalai Lama, what is it like? There's a thread on that where it's described. You'll see the Dalai Lama gets up, 4 o'clock in the morning or something. Does various meditations and different things, About 9:30 in the morning, he eats his breakfast. While he's eating breakfast, he listens to the English language broadcast of the BBC. Because he understands it's important to know what's going on in the world. Anybody who's on any kind of spiritual path, you cannot be on a spiritual path, I believe, and deliberately not put the effort into finding out what's going on in the world every day. It's important, because you need to understand people's lives and what's affecting them. And if you're going to be any use to them, if you're going to be useful at all, you need to know why the price of butter is what it is today. You need to understand things like the housing shortage and the impact that has on people who can't afford to buy a home. The quality of their life. These are fundamental things that anybody who's going to be on a spiritual path needs to know something about. You need to know what's going on in the world. You need to know if there's a storm coming. You need to know if there's bullets about to come. It's important. So
Excuse me.
that was my daily task.
And their magazine was this, was it a vehicle for like proselytizing, or was it just something like an activity that they like to do?
Well, we didn't think of ourselves as proselytizing. We weren't interested in getting converts. We were interested in expressing our ideas through the magazine and through the artwork in the magazine. And letting people know what we're on about. It was also a way to, make some money. But we weren't trying to get large numbers of people. We didn't believe that. I mean, we thought the feeling always was that you either get what we're on about or you don't, and that's fine if you don't. And if you do, okay, you're welcome to be here and join us. But there's no pressure or no attempt to bring in converts. That was not, we were just doing this thing. Yeah.
Excuse my coughing. I have a bad cold.
Sure. Yes.
So what other kind of activities?
What would we do?
Yeah.
Well, we had sorts of interpersonal exercises. We would sit down as a group and we would pair off, and we would maybe look at each other, just kind of stare at each other without saying anything, and then maybe we were told to say things. What do you say what you think about the person you're looking at, and the person hearing it is supposed to accept that and not, have a bad reaction or a reaction, but to be able to listen. We did different types of interpersonal exercises, things like that. We did. We practiced psychometry. So we would do, psychometry on each other, but in a group. You would pair up with somebody and you would take turns doing it. So maybe you'd switch with somebody else. I mean, these sessions would last, I don't know, maybe 40 minutes, maybe an hour at the most. Yeah. Not so long that you would get burnt out. And then we would have, on the weekend, I believe, Saturday, we would have, I guess you would call it a mass. And to me, the high point of the mass was there would be two people that would officiate the mass, a sacrificist and an evangelist. And to me, the high point of it, I forget, Sabbath assembly, that's what we called it, was always the evangelist. If you had a good evangelist. There were some that were good and some that weren't the best at it, but they gave it a try. But a good evangelist really could speak to the room and make everybody feel, they were on the same page. That's what a good evangelist would do. And it would talk about whatever's going on in the group. Yeah.
Like a sermon, or like
Well, a sermon is more rehearsed. This is spontaneous. This is getting up and being able to say, and just start talking. And just being dialed in. Yeah.
And would people respond to the evangelist, or was it more
You'd listened.
you just listened? Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't a call and response. You know. People weren't clapping going amen, because remember, these are British people. This isn't, you know, a AME church in the South, a black church in the South, you know. This is, you know, so you're going to listen. Yeah. But a good evangelist could talk and make the room feel good. Make the room feel whole. Make the room feel connected. Make the room feel like, aha, you know, we're here. Yeah, that's, and it was a good evangelist. It was this, you know, a spiritual exercise in a way. Yeah.
Was there a ritual element to the Mass?
Yes, there was a certain ritual thing, and, you know, I mean, we did a few hymns. We had our own hymnal, you know, and so that was the part that was led by the sacrificist. Okay. So, you know, the sacrificist kind of led the ritualistic aspects, and I really don't remember much about that. That's not, you know. That just kind of gets you in the room, sitting down, gets everybody in the room sitting down, and sets you up for the evangelist.
So, but when you say sacrifice,
yes.
you're not talking about like sacrifices.
No, we didn't sacrifice anything. Nobody was taking a chicken and cutting it in pieces or anything, or goat. You know, we weren't doing that. You know, again, these are English people. They don't do these things. Right, they're anti-vivisectionists. Not true. The Process was anti-vivisection, big time. Process published a small pamphlet on vivisection. Yeah, was totally against that.
So, sacrificed, was this more a conceptual?
Well, they sort of led the ritualistic aspects, you know, of the Sabbath assembly, and then, like I said, they kind of, to me, that they were. Yeah, we get through the ritual. What does the ritual do for us? Well, it gets us all in the room. We're sitting down, we're quiet. It helps us get into the focus. And then what happens? So to me, the kind of magic of it would be a good evangelist could then stand up and begin to speak. And they're talking spontaneously.
So the ritual sounds kind of like something meditative, something.
Well, I mean, it's not silent, right? Because there are, you know, things being said, and then there's the hymns.
But like focusing, or is it a ritual like you're focusing on something, or when you say ritual, like what makes it a ritual? Is it that it's formulaic?
Yeah. That's right.
So there's a time when the evangelist or the sacrificist speaks.
Yes.
Or does something.
Yeah, he speaks.
And then the evangelist.
Right. And then the evangelist kind of gets up and starts evangelizing. And the spontaneous nature of that is, to me, what the magic of being there was about. In other words, if there was no evangelist in this Sabbath assembly, you know, you just walk out the same way you walked in.
So it's verbal.
Right.
Were there any ritual objects or any?
Yeah. So accompanying the sacrifice and the evangelist would be two other people whose role was to carry these sort of bowls. So one bowl had fire in it, and another bowl had water. And so they stood, midway. So you'd have the sacrifice at one end of this assembly and the evangelist at the other end, and on one end of the wall you would have a cross. I don't want to say crucifix, but you would have a cross, and at the other end you would have goat of Mendes, right, representing Christ and Satan, and then you had fire and water midway between them, and at either end you would have, one end you would have the sacrifice, and the other end the evangelist, and so the sacrifice is, leading the prayers, hymnals, and, there'd be somebody with a guitar who, strummed things out. Somebody also maybe with some, small drum, hand drum, like a bongo drum or something, And so then we would all sing along. Yeah. And
what kind of songs?
Oh, well, there's songs that the Process wrote. Yeah, about the end of the world or something. I forget.
They wrote the music as well?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And did the Mass...
Sabbath Assembly,
did that always take place indoors?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there may have been... at some point, somewhere, somebody in some chapter house, they might have done it outdoors. I don't know. But all of the Sabbath assemblies I went to, whether it was New Orleans or Boston or Chicago, it's indoors. Because you've got, first of all, you have winter, and you have a lack of daylight, and where are you going to put people outdoors? You're not going to go out there in these robes and just sit in the grass. Right, so,
So, what was the relationship between, as you saw it, between this group and the community around them? Like, was it just people would go into the coffee shop and they didn't know about this, the spiritual group, or
okay, so the relationship between the Process and the communities that it lived in. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
like, what I mean is, would people know, oh, that's a Process chapter house there?
Well, how would they know? They would know because they had met someone on the street selling a magazine and said, why don't you come by our place? Okay, so then they would know about that, or they had a friend of a friend. It's not like the Process had advertising, right? So there was no, except word of mouth, or you met a Process scene somewhere. And that was, but I mean, how do we connect with the community? Well, we did things for the community. So, for instance, in Boston, we had a soup kitchen, and we would serve meals to anybody who came in and wanted it, and they didn't have to attend any lecture or anything, or they didn't have to do anything to get the soup. The expression in Ireland, he drank the soup.
Yeah.
Nothing like that.
The workhouses, yeah.
Yes, right. Well, the Protestants would go into the areas where the Catholics were starving, and if you converted, you could have the soup. You could drink, if you drank the soup, right? Well, we never did that. I mean, if you're hungry and you want something to eat, come eat, fine. We also had a thrift store where you didn't pay anything. You needed clothing. Well, we've collected all these clothing from people, that donated things to us. And so if you need something, you need a jacket, or you need a pair of pants, or shirt or something, here. Find something off the rack, keep it, use it. We also did we did programs where we went to places and visited people in hospitals and institutions who didn't get visitors. Okay, so I had a regular thing where I went to the in Boston. I went to the Veterans Hospital in Jamaica Plain in the Boston area, and I went to this particular unit every week, and it was men who had strokes, and so they were paralyzed on one side of their body. They had aphasia, and so I went there and hung out with these guys and played checkers with them. And, so this would have been, in the 70s. These were all guys who were veterans of Normandy and the Pacific, which I think about it now, how lucky I was to be able to do that. So that was a regular visitation thing that I did. Every week I was there, in the middle of the week. I would fit that in between other things I was doing. I also used to go to nursing homes because, the elderly, their families are often very busy, or they don't have a family, they've outlived their spouse, and.
And do you remember if these ideas of visiting nursing homes and hospitals and the soup kitchen, were they things you discussed as a group, or do you remember how those ideas came about to do that?
No, they just sort of came down from above. Like, look, we should be doing some things, and this is what we should be doing, this kind of things, and then you go figure out how to do it. So you go do this. So you call up a hospital, say, hey, do you have somebody who volunteers? Do you want anybody to volunteer? You call up a nursing home, say, hey, I'd like to volunteer. Can I come and volunteer? And they'll always say, sure. And invite you in. And then to get food. We didn't have money to go buy food. We would call up restaurants. We'd call and say, listen, we got a soup kitchen. Would you like to give anything to this, soup kitchen? And then we established some restaurants. We would pick up from them, excess food. We call groceries because grocery stores are going to throw food away. Well, they could give it to us, and we could feed somebody. We could feed people. We called it donating. We would call and ask for things. But we also did that, to furnish the cavern, if you will, in Boston. We call a furniture store to say, hey, look, we got this coffee shop and we run a soup kitchen and we could really use some chairs or a table. Do you, and we'd get things. People would just give us stuff and we'd go collect it, like the Salvation Army or something. But we didn't sell it. We would use it. We didn't sell anything. We didn't. If people wanted to make a donation, cash donation, they could do that too. And if people came and ate and got a shirt out of the thrift store and they wanted to give us $1 or something, they're fine. But nobody asked them for that. Yeah.
You said from above, like some of these ideas came from above. So what was the hierarchy?
Well, you had Robert and Mary Ann, and then you had, sort of people that were around them, they called the masters, so you had like Joel, Aaron, Malachi, Hathor, a few others, and...
were they names given to them by the process?
By Mary Ann. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And did Marianne and Robert live in the same place?
No.
No.
They lived apart from the chapter house. Yeah.
And did they interact much? Did you see them around?
No. They were never. once Robert and Marianne came into New Orleans, and I met them. And this is just before the departure.
Was that the only time you met them?
Yes. Yeah.
What were they like?
Well, no, it wasn't the only time I met Robert. I met Robert again. I spent time with Robert after the process ceased to be. When he came to New Orleans, so I spent a fair amount of time with him here in New Orleans. But when I met them at the time, I really didn't interact with Robert. You know, I was 13 years old, but I interacted with Marianne. And she wanted to meet me. And, you know, it's like, I didn't know that they had existed, you know. Nobody had told me that, hey, there's this couple named Bob and Marianne. They're kind of like our leaders. I'm like, you know, that would have been news to me. You know, I'm like, oh, okay, and now I'm going to meet them. Oh, okay, you know.
Yeah. Because
there wasn't anything about talking about them, at least, you know, to me anyway, around me. And it never really was. It wasn't, you know. I mean, I don't know, maybe people talked about them, but I don't engage in a lot of things that other people do in groups and things, you know.
But it wasn't like they're the leaders of the process church.
Well, you knew that. I mean, yeah. After that, you know that they're the leaders, and these books are coming out. Robert's writing all these books, you know. So I'm like, oh yeah, he's the teacher. That's what we called him, the teacher. And we called them as a couple the Omega, you know, beginning then Alpha Omega, you know. And he was the teacher, and she was the oracle.
And do you know why Marianne wanted to meet you, or you were just told she wants to meet you?
No, they didn't say, Marianne wants to meet you because of X, Y, Z. No. She, you know, yeah. She'd like to meet you. Oh, okay. You know, I'm a 13-year-old kid. I'm not saying, oh, why does she want to meet me? You know. But I mean, I understand now why she wants to meet me. She wanted to meet me because, you know, the idea of taking me with them, that would have been her ideas. That would have been something she wanted to do. And after meeting me, she would see, yes, I'd like to do, you know. And I think that whatever she heard about me, I think it may have reminded her of herself. You know, because she grew up a hard life as a kid in Glasgow. And I think, you know, someone who's perceived as a dead-end kid, it's pretty much, you know, it's someone that she felt like, okay, I get this kid. I understand him, which, you know, and so yeah, I want to meet him because this is not the average person that's coming into the process. You know, the average person is older, right? They're 20s. They're educated. I mean, you look at a lot of the masters, they were, you know, a couple of them had gone to Sandhurst. You know, several were like Hope and Tim and I forget who else were architects. You know, these were professional people. And here's this street kid. But there's something here with this kid. Like there was something in her. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's why she wanted to meet me, and I think that's why she felt like, you know, we want to invite him along. We want to bring him. And then he shows up in London, like that, boom.
And what was your impression of Marianne when you met her?
Well, my impression of Marianne was that she had this incredible gift to make everybody in that room, and the room was full of people. I mean, there's been 20 people in that room easily. She had this ability to make everybody in the room feel that she was paying attention to them all at the same time. I mean, this is the kind of gift that politicians have, where they make, you know, you meet them and you feel like you alone are center of their attention, which is not true. But you do have their attention, but, right? And so I just kind of like, after meeting her, and I just kind of sort of receded back to observe her and see what she was all about, and then to watch how others were reacting to her.
And would you say she was the one giving the impetus to things, or like was she charismatic, and or was Robert also charismatic?
Well, he has a different kind of charisma, very different. Yeah, and I don't know what to describe that exactly, but it's very different. I mean, Robert, and I got to know him when he came here to New Orleans, because at that meeting, when I was 13, I just saw him, and he was dressed in a robe, and I think it was pretty light colored too. It wasn't the same dark brown that Joelle was wearing. It was, I remember it was really light, like just a off-white kind.
And was it just like a monocolor? Did it have a symbol on it? Or?
No, I don't remember any symbol on it. It was a Jesus robe. Robert looks a bit like Jesus, the hair and the beard and all, and in his photographs you see in the book he looks like Jesus, So it's pretty easy to sell Robert as Jesus, He never said he was Jesus. He never said that, and I don't think he ever thought of that. I think he thought of himself as someone who has things to say, but I don't think he would, he's not a presumptuous guy. He's not an egotist. He wasn't. I found him to be very sincere and genuine and open and honest. When he was here in New Orleans, he and Faye, who was from New Orleans, that's why they came here. She had family here. And I knew her, like pre-process, before she got involved. I knew her. I even, as a 16-year-old, later, I got my driver's license in her car. Here, using her car with her, but that's kind of a funny story. But anyway, so when they came here, they really didn't have much money. I don't know how they were existing. She got some kind of a job. He got a job working at a carpet installation place, hauling.
You mean Faye?
No, I mean Faye? Robert did.
And Faye got a job?
Doing something. But Robert got a job like doing heavy manual labor. And so when I would go over to their house, which I think was in Broadmoor, they were not living in a white neighborhood. They were living in a minority neighborhood. And they had a nice place, but, no furniture. But he was doing heavy work.
Yeah.
And he would come home from work. I mean, he was dirty. He was dirty. He worked hard, And then he would hold some, was trying to organize doing some sessions and things. But for whatever reason, and at the same time the foundation was going here in New Orleans. They had a chapter house here on Ursuline Street. And
was that something simultaneous to the process or after?
After the process. Yeah. So when Robert and Marion split and Robert left, all the ideas of the process go with Robert. And so this corporate structure, whatever it is, kind of had to invent an ideology. And that was completely absurd to me. I wasn't part of it because I could tell, like, I had left before that split happened, And I could tell there was something not right with the process, and it was time to leave. It was time to go. And so I left with another processing, an IP, what they called an IP, an internal processing.
And what year was that?
I don't know, 72 maybe. I could be off by a year or so, but around then. That's when I left. And then the split happened, maybe less than a year or a year. But I think more than a year later. And then all of a sudden there's like, all these people are like, with this new ideology, which never made any sense to me. And I'm like, what are you doing? Because I never walked away from the ideology, the idea of things like, loving your enemy, and, Christ's enemy is Satan, that whole idea. And the idea is about taking responsibility for one's actions, and, understanding the blame game, if you will, and some other. I never tried to push that away because it made sense to me. All of it that made sense to me. But what didn't make sense to me was, how can you stop believing in stuff that you so fervently believed in? If you believe that some people kind of gone off the rails and they're not following the tenets, or not, being honest, or not, that's one thing, which is kind of what I felt. I felt like we're not really on a path of being useful to ourselves and to others, and this is just a pointless exercise to stay here. So I walked out. But I used to come and go as I wanted.
And that was okay? It was okay?
I was always accepted back. There was never any issue with me. So when I go to London, and I'm there for a couple months, and everybody's happy, and all of a sudden I just kind of had this feeling I should come back to America. So I just told them, hey, I'm going back to America. They were a little bit shocked, but they was like, oh, okay. So I come back to New Orleans, and I'm here for a while, and then I get a letter from them. Because we didn't have, I didn't have a phone, there was no cell phones or anything, I got a letter from them, and it said, at the time, as a young person, I was making my living by making handmade jewelry, silver jewelry. So they wrote to me and said, look, we're going to open up a new place in Boston. We want you to come, and if you come, we'll give you space to build a jewelry shop, and you can make jewelry there and take care of yourself and whatever you want. You just come in here, we'll give you the space, you build the shop, and it's yours to run, and you sell whatever you sell, you keep the money and everything. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. So I went to Boston with a friend of mine and my dog. I had a dog at that time. And then later, what happened then? I think my girlfriend joined me then, or maybe she came later. I had a girlfriend, teenage girlfriend, who joined the process at one point.
Did you meet her when she joined the process?
No, I knew her. She was from New Orleans. I knew her here.
Did she join it because she
was attached to me?
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Yeah. So anyway, so I went to Cambridge, and they had a place on Inman Street, and I built a jewelry shop, and I started making jewelry. And at some point, they said, you know, we're going to do something different. We'll just give you a stipend to live. So they gave me a stipend, and then I was, you know, wasn't making jewelry anymore. I was selling magazines, going on the street, talking to people, walking dogs, doing all that process stuff. And I did that for a while. And then I felt like I should leave again. So, and during that time in Boston, they had begun to baptize people, you know. And so they baptized me and gave me a name. They called me Brother Mark and told me what it meant, you know. And then
was that something similar to a Catholic baptism?
Oh, I don't know. I've never had a Catholic baptism, but I assume it would be. I assume it would be. I don't really remember much about it, but anyway.
So you didn't have to be baptized to go to the boarding school with the monks?
No, that's right. No, and I wasn't Catholic, right?
Yeah.
They let me in because my father and uncle had gone there, and they decided to take pity on my single mom, you know, and let me in there. And then they regretted it 4 years later. But anyway, that's another story. So anyway, yeah, I was in Boston for a while, and you know, and then I leave with my girlfriend. Vietnam War was going on. I don't know, I was 17 at the time. I come back to New Orleans, and I'm here for a while, and then I wound up splitting a house with somebody else who'd been kind of in and out of the process as a young person, but he's a little bit older than me. And a bunch of us then wrote off. We decided to go to Vermont and live communally. And that lasted about 2 weeks. And everybody except me and my girlfriend left Vermont, and I stayed there for about a year. Because I had to register for the draft, and, you know, I wanted to be close to the Canadian border in case I needed to walk across. And my draft board is in Vermont. And, you know, I turned 18, and then a friend of mine who'd been with me and from New Orleans up to Vermont, it was kind of living in Woodstock, New York at the time, I think. And he came to see me in the winter. We drove up to see me. I don't even remember how he found me, but he said, you know, we should go back. Things are different or something. I was like, yeah, okay. I'm not going to get called up for the draft. I've got a pretty high number now. I'm fine.
So this was a friend of yours who'd also left?
Yeah.
And you had been in touch with him in the meantime?
Yeah.
Or he had, like, rejoined them, is it?
I guess, I don't know, he'd gone around them and felt like, I don't know, maybe we should come back. So he felt like he needed to come get me and come back.
Yeah.
For whatever reason. So, went back. And then they were like, okay, they're fine with me coming back. And they said, you know, maybe we should rebaptize you again. Do you want the same name? What name do you want? It's up to you. So I picked a name that was kind of, it was, I don't know, derivative or associated with Mark. It was Marcellus. And I said, yeah, all right, this is what the name I want. And the meaning was the same. And so they rebaptized me, and that was fine. And then I was there in Boston, and
was it a ceremony?
Yeah, there would be a ceremony. Yeah, baptism ceremony. And, you know, and I was issued a P card. The first time they didn't have P cards. By then they had P cards, you know, those process identification cards.
And was I know I keep going back to the rituals and the ceremonies, but was it something, was it similar to the Sabbath assembly, or was
no, I mean, yeah, Yeah, I mean, there'd be a lot of people there. And it may have been they may have had it as part of the Sabbath assembly.
And was water involved in the baptism? Or?
Yeah, water and fire. Water and fire. Yeah. I don't recall much about it because, again, we're looking at 50 years ago. So I get rebaptized and I'm there, and then I'm, living they're taking care of my living expenses, and I'm, working in the cavern and helping out doing one thing or another, and going to sell magazines and going off to the VA hospital. I'm doing all that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so I was like 18 at the time. Yeah, I was 18 years old.
So how long did you
last?
Did you
Well,
were things different?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it felt very good. So then they said, look, we want you and this other person and your dog to go to a Chicago chapter because the morale is low there. They're not doing it so good. They don't seem to be able to sell magazines, and people don't seem very happy. So basically that's what they said. And they said, so we're sending you to Chicago. And I'm like, okay, you're sending me to Chicago. So me and my friend, and we're still friends today, this individual and my dog, we get brought to Logan Airport. We get on a plane and we fly to Chicago. I don't know how we got from the airport to the chapter house on Wells Street, but we did. And yeah, and I could tell the Chicago chapter was not happy. People weren't happy there.
What kind of size group was in Chicago?
Smaller than Boston. They had they were doing, soup kitchen, and they had a thrift shop there too, and they were running the same kind of programs, people going out on the street. But they just weren't very happy. I mean, they weren't doing good. People weren't really connecting with others on the street. And I don't, yeah. So I get there, and I'm just like, okay, all right, so let's go. We used to call we didn't say selling magazines. We were going to we would call it donating. So it's like, okay, I just started donating, and I donated. You would kind of donate in small teams. You'd go to certain sections of Chicago, in the downtown, what's called the Loop. And then they would send people, usually every week, maybe 3 or 4 people would get in a car. Would get a car. And you would drive off to some Midwest city. Could be Detroit, could be Indianapolis, it could be Milwaukee, it could be St. Louis. Once I even went out to Kansas City, Missouri, which is way out there, long drive. And you would go to these places, for maybe 3 days or something, and you would be downtown or at the airport. Some places you'd go to the airport and you could sell magazines.
And the chapter houses, like what you've mentioned, New Orleans, Chicago, Vermont, Boston.
They didn't have a place in Vermont. I went and lived in Vermont.
Oh, sorry, you went. So they had in those cities.
Mm-hmm.
The chapter houses. Did they have chapter houses in other cities?
Yeah, I mean, eventually they opened up. They had a place in L.A. at one point. They had a place in San Francisco, I think. They had a place in Miami, Toronto, New York City, and I think that was it. North America.
And was there any hierarchy to those, or they're just all called chapter houses?
Well, they were all just called chapter houses, and so you would have a father or mother, they would have a title, and, they sort of ran things. you know, and you know, you had everybody else, you know, brother, sister, whatever, you know. Yeah.
And in everyday communication, would you call each other brother and sister? Like, would you call people by their titles, Brother Malachi, or was it more informal?
It was more informal. The only formal thing, I mean, our greetings were not, hey, how you doing, goodbye. You know, we would say, we had something we said, we would say to each other, as it is, so be it. You know, we would say that was, you know, but.
And you'd say that in, like, everyday speech?
Yeah, you might say that, you know, and it's kind of like Salam Alaikum, you know?
Hmm.
Yeah, and it's said in a lot of different ways. You know, it can be said in a, you know, there might be something that happens, and then you just say as it is, you know. You know, you see something go on, it's in the, yeah, so be it. You know, it can be said. It could have a lot of different meanings, and depending on the context. And I think maybe sometimes I might use a title with somebody if there was some kind of formal reason to go ask for something or communicate with something in a kind of formalistic way. You know, there might be, you know, father, son, you know, do you have a minute? You know, that's going to get their attention.
Yeah.
You know, like, okay, this is serious.
It's respectful.
It's respectful, you know, and you're going to get their attention. Certainly if yeah. Sometimes, you know, you just speak to people. You didn't have to pronounce their name. You just there.
Did you all refer to yourselves as processians?
Yes, processians.
Processians.
Mm.
Back then.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. So I got to Chicago, and I was there about a year, and then I just things were not feeling right. But it wasn't just Chicago. There was something bigger. I was sensing this organization's seems like it's going off the rails. And that's when I left. Came back home to New Orleans.
And was that to do with ideology like you were talking about earlier? Or?
No, it was more about, seemed like practice. Yeah. It seemed like the dynamics worked great. It seemed there was something that was amiss. And then, you know, the divorce came out, and, you know, and all these things. So, yeah, okay, so that's what I was feeling. This, you know, because prior to the divorce, there's going to be a lot of, you know, if you just look at a family, you know, if a husband and wife are together for many years, they don't just one week wake up and say, hey, let's get divorced. Okay, sounds like a good idea. You know what I mean? That's a whole, you know, and then they leave and they shake hands and they go, see you around. Yeah, okay, be good. It's over, you know.
Divide everything exactly in half, you know.
Yeah, right. That's not how things go. That's not the real world. So with those two, you know, there was stuff being felt. And the last magazine that came out, I thought was brilliant. It was on love. So if you looked at the earlier ones, you had sex, fear, death, right? And they're all very dark. You know, the covers are dark. They're very black. And then this magazine called Love comes out, and it's like sky blue. And it's, you know, and there are things in it. I was like, yeah, this is where we should be going. But it didn't feel like we were going there or anything like that. That was in that, you know, it didn't feel like it. Because what was really going on was that this, you know, there was this separation. And, you know, it was it's transmitting itself through the organization. You know, even though I didn't see Robert and Mary Ann, you know, the people that were running the chapter, they would have been in communication and would have been affecting them. And even though they didn't know exactly what was going on, it's still, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, parents, you know, they think that, you know, when they're going to get divorced, they think that their kids are going to be like shocked. Well, yeah, their kids are going to be shocked, but they also know what the hell's going on. You know, at a certain point, the kids are like, "Mom, why haven't you left Dad?" You know, I mean, their families is like that. You know, because, you know, no matter how you try to, people act out and they enact out, and it transmits itself, and so that's what happened. So it kind of came to an end, but it didn't. That structure came to an end. But the ideas about it and what it's about didn't come to an end. Certainly not. Because, I mean, you see today, there's so many people that are interested in the process. I mean, people who have taken time to listen to this interview. And most of them were born after the process ceased to be. Right? Such as yourself.
Yeah.
Why is that? Right, there's something about it, right, that exists, right? It exists, and you know, you can't draw it you can't put it on a grid. You know, I can't give you a formula for it, but you either kind of sense what it's about, and people do. And there's really no point in trying to do that. Trying to say, this is the magic formula for the process. You know, you can't do it. You just have to experience it. It's like I was talking about during the Sabbath assembly. The ritual part helps kind of get you set up, primed for the evangelist to create the magic. Right? And the evangelists, if they're good evangelists, they're going to be able to articulate what's been going on that week with everybody, you know, with the group, and be able to describe it. And people will kind of feel that, and they feel, yes, this is what I've been feeling this week, you know, and then, you know, the service is over and everybody feels like something happened. And it did. We all feel validated. We all feel, you know, like what we were experiencing was seen and heard and described.
A lot of what you've described is like connection between people and saying things and, you know, actively listening to it, or the verbal and the ritual parts of it. Were there things that were non-human, like spirits or beings? Did that come into it for you?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like in a ritual context or
dreams. Well, that's for me. I mean,
yeah.
Other people, you know, may have seen things more consciously. I mean, there were some things that also I experienced. Sort of like experiences like, you know, like Shackleton's Third Man, you know, experiences like that. You know, I had an experience in I was out with a process scene, and we were in New York City, and it was nighttime. And it was winter, and it was cold, and we had been out on the street, pretty much from 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning, all day, donating, right? And we would take a break like once an hour, get in, and so we would go into the basement of a hotel. And I think we were in the basement of the Sherry Netherland, which is this hotel, it's a fancy hotel. I don't know why these hotels let us come in. The doorman felt sorry for us or something. I don't know. But they would let us come into their lobby and warm up, or go down into the basement where the restrooms were. And I remember being down in there with her, and had this experience where.
Were you in robes?
Well, we didn't go out. The only clothes we had were our uniforms, right? So we're in, black, black cape, right? Got long underwear on underneath. But
maybe they were scared to say no.
But yeah, it could be. It could be. But doormen in New York City, they're not afraid much. I don't think much going to scare them, right? Because they got to deal with a lot, Anyway, yeah. So. So I was in the basement and had this interesting experience using telekinesis. Were you moving objects around? Yeah. Well, we see what happens is that you get to a point of beyond what you think you can do physically, but you're still doing things, and you then are able to do things that you didn't know you could do. And I think that's an important part. Just like reading a newspaper, I think if you're going to be on a spiritual path, you have to do things physically. And Tim talked about that in Neil's documentary about digging a hole with Joshua. Kind of working to the point of exhaustion, but being able to continue on. And I think in the process, gave you an opportunity to test yourself in different ways like that with the physical. And so that once you kind of get to that point, other aspects of other abilities open up because you've broken down a lot of barriers with yourself. You stop believing what you can't do. Because if you can imagine yourself doing something, you probably can do it. You can do it. I mean, I've found that in my life. And so, I've had pursuits like, rock climbing, right? Serious climbing in wilderness areas, right? Where there's no rescue that's gonna happen. If you fuck up, you're fucked. In serious places, where there aren't other people around, and on big walls, and doing things, other kinds of physical adventures, and then you find that other people in the process have had things like that, where they've had to go out through the storms and cross the Alps, and not die. Not dying is very important. I don't think anybody died doing any of this stuff, but there were times when, you were pretty cold and you were pretty hungry, but you still had to go out there and you had to stop people on the street who were just as fucking cold, and you got to get their attention and you got to connect with them, and neither of you are going to feel cold. They're going to get it. and they're going to give you money and take a magazine just so you go away. But,
Yeah.
And then but people like that will, if they're curious, they'll come around to the coffee shop. And you can meet all kinds of people. I mean, I've met Truman Capote in front of the plaza one night. I didn't know who he was. I found out from the doorman. Afterwards he said, "What did Truman Capote want with you?" I said, "Who?" He said, "Truman Capote." And I was like, "Oh." I was a kid.
Yeah.
What was that? I was like 18. I didn't know who Truman Capote was. I met this doctor who wrote the baby book for my generation, all moms of my generation, all boomer moms, and all had the Dr. Spock's book. Yeah, Dr. Spock.
Yeah, I know this book, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I met him at the airport in St. Louis, and I had a really interesting conversation with him. I was selling magazines in the airport, and I was smoking a cigarette. They wanted me to stop smoking. And then he started talking to me about being in academia and free speech, at the time. And there was, whatever discussion was going on at the faculty about, they were upset with some of the student protests and some of the words they were using and stuff, So, I mean, you'd meet all kinds of people on the street. I think there's a photograph of Malachi and Mary Tyler Moore. And who did I meet on the street in New York? I met Angela Lansbury on the street, front Saks. So you could be talking to anybody. When you just walk up and talk to them. I mean, it's just, what you did, they're going to stop or not. When you come up, you're looking kind of odd. You're all black. You got these magazines, and you're looking right at them in the eye, and you're not afraid to talk to them. They're not, people aren't.
You said you used to go to the airports?
Yeah. Yeah.
Were there Hare Krishnas doing that at the time?
No, they hadn't started yet.
Maybe they
had. Yeah. Maybe they had. I never ran across them, and I'm trying to think. We had gone to the airport that was in St. Louis where I met Spock, and I'm trying to think if I'd gone to any other airport. In Chicago, we would just go downtown, because to get to O'Hare, it's way out of the city. What would be the point? You're going to talk to people downtown on State Street in front of, Filene's, in the Loop or somewhere. Yeah, there's no point.
You mentioned psychometry and telekinesis. Mm-hmm. Did you do any other things like, you said it wasn't really meditation, so did you do things like hypnotism or anything like that?
No. We also used to do massage. We would do like a group, members of the public could come, it's like, okay, so, let's kind of feel each other's, and the point was, yes, to do a massage, but to develop a sense of touch, to feel the bodies, to actually read the body. As you're giving somebody, like they lay flat down on the floor in their clothes, and you're in your clothes, and you sit next to them, and you massage their body, their back. And, you're not just doing it mechanically, but to have a focus and a sense of connecting with them so that you actually can feel. Yeah, we did that too. Yeah. And we did other things. I don't even remember a lot of things we did, really.
And through your time in the process, did you know about the connection with Scientology?
Yeah, I think I was vaguely aware of it. And every now and then we might run into a Scientologist on the street, and they were kind of hostile. It was like, yeah, whatever. And it was, I don't know, I think I kind of like, oh, yeah, Scientology, that's for old people. Or something. That's the past. This is not. You know, they don't have any ideology. What are they about? L. Ron Hubbard's like floating around on a boat in the middle of the ocean. You know, what are they up to? I don't know what they're up to. You know, they're often doing their thing with Dianetics and, you know, whatever that's about. Okay, but there's nothing here. We're not connected with Scientology. You know, we're moving further away.
The Scientologists on the street would be hostile. Was there any animosity or anything said in the process about Scientology, or it just wasn't?
No, because it wasn't
relevant.
It wasn't relevant, and it wouldn't have fit our practice, right? I mean, if your practice is, if you say your thing is loving your enemy, then you're not going to have enemies. So you're not going to speak disparagingly of anything. Although, you know, we talked about the gray forces, but that was a kind of a comment on society, you know, kind of Western civilization, if you will.
Well, not really like this, but the only thing I can think of is like saying a white picket fence, like grey. Just grey forces mean kind of mundane, you know, people who don't really think about things or...
No, it was more of a... I would say it was closer to a class and socioeconomic outlook on society and how people's lives, how they were living their lives. You know, people are in this trap, right? Where they grow up without ever thinking about anything. They're taught facts, but they're not taught to think about these facts. Okay? And so they don't think about the facts they're taught because they're not taught to think about them. One of the things they're taught is that nobody's going to give you a job. Nobody's going to pay you to think. They're going to pay you to do what they want you to do. They're not going to pay you to think, so stop thinking. Don't tell us how to improve or do something. You know, they're not paying you for that. You know, the bigger the corporation, the less they want your ideas, right? Right? So you're going to come in and you're going to work for them, and they're going to pay you whatever they're going to pay you. You know, and then you're going to go home, and you're going to have your house, and you're going to have your 2.3 kids and your golden retriever and in a Volvo and something else, Volvo station wagon and God knows what else, you know, whatever today it is, a Tesla or something, right? And you're going to live your life, and this sets you up for the quote unquote, you know, midlife crisis, right? Which is not something that happens with other people's who aren't part of this. In other words, you've never heard, you will never hear of the Australian indigenous person. The indigenous man who says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having a midlife crisis. I think I need to get a Corvette boomerang," you know, whatever, right? That's just not that's just not going to thing. You know, you're not going to have that with, you know, Navajos or, you know, Inuits, right? I mean, they're going to have crisis in their life, but there's not the midlife crisis that is a product of our culture today. And so looking at the gray forces is kind of like this analysis of the world that we have created through our economic empire and arrangements. Yeah, that people blindly, you know, get up every morning and ride the subway to work and go to their job and punch in at a certain hour and leave at a certain hour, and then they go home and they do the same thing over all the time. And they raise their kids, and then their kids are raised and gone, and then they're like living with a stranger. Because the two of you have never really gone on any journey of self-discovery together.
Would you say that being a processian is, it's like the process is continual, it's a reflecting on life, I mean. It's a continual journey of discovery.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
And would you say that that's something for you that continues beyond the church. There doesn't.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, the church isn't a house.
Yeah. But I mean, I mean more
right.
being in the process.
Yeah. Well, you carry it with
started you on your journey.
Yeah, started me on my journey,
Yeah.
and it's it's still part of my journey. Yeah, things I learned in the process I use, but everything I've learned from everywhere I use. Studying martial arts prepared me to be a very good advocate in the legal field, where I was able to, literally, the study of Aikido, where you learn to deal with multiple attackers, more than one person attacking you at a time, prepared me to make arguments in front of appellate courts, both federal and state, because I was used to having more than one person come at me at a time. And so it was very easy to stay centered and to breathe and to be able to direct and redirect these challenges to my arguments. And, then I was chosen in law school to be the interscholastic director of the moot court board when I went to law school. And what that means is that, moot court boards, it's in law schools there's two things you can do. You can go into law review, which is writing articles and proofreading, or you can do moot court, which is preparation for appellate work, where you write briefs and you go and argue the briefs. You're going to a panel, whether it's a state judicial panel, state Supreme Court ultimately, or U.S. Appellate Court or Supreme Court, whatever. And so moot court boards, there would be interscholastic competitions with schools, so like some law school would host, we're going to do a thing on family law, and they would send us all out to all the schools, and we're going to do it, November. Anybody wants to participate, wants to send a team, let us know. And so whatever schools wanted to field a team, they'd say, oh yeah, I want to participate in this family law, commercial law, whatever the subject would be, and then you would get the problem, then you would go to that law school for the event, and you would compete against other teams. So I did that. I was chosen to do that, and then they chose me to prep and train all the teams that we sent out the following year, and a big part of it, and then in actual practice, when I became an attorney and I went, and argued in front of the state Supreme Court, and federal court, appellate court, Second Circuit, Third Circuit. Yeah, my martial arts training helped me with that. So everything you do in life will be useful for what you're doing. And there were things in the process that I learned that helped me in trial, in terms of examining witnesses, being able to perceive of how to ask the question and the follow-up question, and to be able to be spontaneous enough, but also that so and to maintain my cool, which is not easy for me to do. but everything you do kind of builds together to make you who you are, and it's going to be useful for what you're doing.
Would you still call yourself a processian?
No, I would call myself a processian. Sure. I mean, why not? I mean, how do I shed that? How do I shed that? How do I say, oh, I'm not a processian? Well, I could say, yeah, I'm not a member of the process anymore. I could say that, sure, because there is no process. But what does that mean? Well, yeah, there's no more process anymore, but I mean, don't you kind of carry that around on you? Yeah. Okay, well then, is that what a process-seeing is? Yeah. Okay, then there you go. What, yeah. I can say I'm not a Catholic, and I'm not Jewish, because I was never bar mitzvah or baptized. The only thing I was ever baptized in was the process. But I don't say that I'm a process-seeing because I had a baptism and Marianne gave me a name. That's nice. That makes it official, and I have a P card.
Something you feel.
No, it's because, and even if I didn't have those, without those things, it's like, oh, this is what I was experienced, I was there, I took it with me, I learned from it, I use it, it's been valuable to me in my life, and will continue to be valuable to me. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.